All right. Good evening, everybody. How are you all doing? You can probably hear the birds around me. It's so beautiful where I'm at in my place in Mexico, in Guadalajara. So today I'm going to actually talk to you about something really awesome. I had this revelation when I was doing my meditation this morning about how the masculine and masculine energy can truly protect and support the feminine energy. And I'm talking about energy within ourselves. So if you're someone who wants to really grow your feminine energy, if you're someone who wants to be able to like find rest and be productive, if you're someone who even wants to grow your masculine energy, this conversation is going to be really helpful for you. So the theme of this month's, I have a membership called the Emotional Freedom Collective, and the theme of this month was all about the masculine and the feminine. And so, I've done a whole series of calls. So I did a call earlier this week. Actually, it was on Tuesday, which was about the masculine and the feminine. And that got me to really think, with a lot of questions of how can we grow our feminine energy? How can we grow our masculine energy? It got me to think. And this morning, I realized that as I was telling them, the feminine energy is like a rose, right? So think about a rose and a beautiful, beautiful flower, right? One of the most gorgeous flowers in the whole, biological kingdom. Now, the rose is actually protected so strongly by a thorn. And when we look at the thorn, we think, oh my God, this is disgusting. Like, a thorn, it's going to hurt me. But the thorn and the rose serve such a beautiful synchronicity together where the flower, which is the feminine aspect, is allowed to be displayed, allowed to look so beautiful. But the thorn, even though it knows that it's not very good looking, that it possibly causes harm to people, that it's not very appreciated, it provides protection. It allows the rose to bloom because the thorn exists. To us human beings who don't necessarily understand it, we're like, oh my God, it's so annoying, this fucking thorn. But the two of them actually are what makes the rose so beautiful, because otherwise anybody who goes by, any animal that brushes by will destroy that beautiful flower. So now if you have to think of your own life, if you have to think of your own self and say, how can I allow my rose to flourish? How can I, as the feminine, allow my rose to flourish? Now, a lot of you women, for example, may be single. And so you may think to yourself and you may be wondering, okay, yeah, I don't have a man yet in my life to provide that masculine energy where then I can complement it with my feminine energy. So how can I do that just on my own? And I came across, like in my meditation today, I was thinking to myself, and the left side of my body more recently has gone through a lot of beating, a lot of trauma, and the left side is the feminine side of the body. And I'm realizing that it's been worn out. And the right side of my body, which represents the masculine, has been completely fine. In fact, you won't even believe it. I have so many gray hairs on the left side of my head, and I have not a single one on the right side of my head. I have injuries on my left side of my back, on my left knee, on my ankle. Everything is so crazy on my left side. This comes to psychosomatics about the masculine and the feminine side of the body. But it made me wonder, am I not doing enough to protect my feminine energy? Now, a lot of women in North America, a lot of women in conditioning of individualistic cultures. Individualistic cultures are cultures like the ones in North America, the ones in, hey, Joshua, buddy, the ones in North America, the ones maybe in Northern Europe, where the value of the individual is prided more than the value of the community. So even in these cultures, a woman is told that you are not valuable enough unless you represent enough of like an economic success, professional success, unless you're paying the bills, unless you're very independent. As human beings, we're not meant to be solo. We're not supposed to exist by ourselves. I mean, that's why we're born into community. That's why we're born off another being. However, we have to be able to develop our own energy so that we're not dependent on somebody else. And so in this space, now when you're asking, a lot of people have asked me and said, hey, Yats, how can I develop my masculinity or my femininity as a woman? Because unfortunately, and I've dated so many women in North America, especially, I come from a very collectivist culture, but I've dated so many women in North America, especially, who have such strong masculine conditioning, and it's not their fault. It's because they've been raised in societies where what they're contributing is not valuable enough. It's not valid enough. So what happens is unconsciously, they start to suppress their own feminine energy. Why? Because they're so used to the whole of society doing it. And so they start to get conditioned and think for themselves that, yeah, I just because I'm like, I'm playful and creative and flowy, those things are not valuable enough. Those things are not worth enough. I can't really become an artist. I can't really step into the spiritual space. There's no money for those kind of things. So what do I have to do? I have to step into a professional space. I have to wake up at 4 a.m. I have to push myself and be aggressive about developing this identity. I have to become tough. I have to become hyper independent. And so all of these things unconsciously suppress the feminine energy. Now, this is how beautiful God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, has created all of us, because yin can't survive without yang, and the yang can't survive without the yin. So the masculine and the feminine have to be able to complement each other to be able to survive. So in this particular space, I'm going to explain how exactly the masculine within you can actually support and elevate the feminine within you to be able to survive. Now, ancient Taoists and ancient Buddhists and people from the East who designed and studied and created like all this psychosomatic philosophy and the masculine and feminine, they believed the masculine and feminine was in every single thing. And actually it is. If you look at flowers, right? Flowers have a stamen, which is actually the masculine part of it, and they have I can't remember for the life of me what the feminine part of the flower is, which actually gets fertilized by the stamen, so I apologize. But they both exist, and they both have to serve their purpose, much like I just talked about, like the rose and the thorn. So in our bodies, in our lives, what are the things that represent the feminine? Creativity, flow, rest. This is a massive, massive, massive one, which in individualistic societies, in North American societies, we completely belittle. We don't give enough value to rest. We don't value the ability of growth that happens when we're resting. And here's how. The human body, for those of you, I actually just hit the gym and came back. And what happens is when we work out, we think we're actually building muscle, but we're not. We're actually destroying muscle fiber. So it's a catabolic process. That's actually represented by the masculine, where you go to the gym or you go exercise or you're pushing yourself. Where the muscle actually grows is when you're resting, your brain actually sends hormones, growth hormones through your body that actually repair the muscle fibers. So without rest, you cannot actually grow your muscles, which is why you have to have off days. You have to have like times when you relax. So the rest there is so important for your goal, which is what? To grow. So the combination of the masculine, which is like pushing and doing the exercise of whatever you're doing, and the feminine of resting, guilt-free, without the fucking shame of society, without the judgment of everybody around, is so important to be able to actually grow. Ancient prophets and philosophers actually believed that the universe or God or whatever spoke to them only when they were really quiet, not when they were actually going out and preaching to people. So that's why they spent so much time alone. So when we talk about meditation, that's very feminine. It's actually sitting just with yourself and your own intuition, your own voice, listening and channeling the voice of the universe and the earth to be able to listen to yourself. Hyperproductivity is the opposite. It's masculine. Now you need to be productive, but you also need to complement that with rest. You need to be able to teach like I'm doing, but I also need to be able to sit with myself in the mornings and meditate. And I have a practice of just, stretching, meditating, being with myself. Apologize for the helicopter or the plane going up and above. Think about other areas in your life. So today I was talking to my community on Facebook and I was telling them that in this revelation for myself, I actually realized I have to use my masculine to grow my feminine, because last week, for example, I was working so much to produce value for this community, for like the retreat we're doing, for the gauntlets I'm doing, for the EFC, all of those things together, that I burnt out. And my body literally forced me to take rest for 4 days. And you won't believe it, in the 5 days that I was working, I saw no success with any of the projects I was working on. And in the 4 days that I was completely at rest, everything was growing. Everything actually happened. And so if we balance it out bit by bit, if we structure rest, if you organize creative time in your life, if you organize playtime in your life, if you organize music or art, you are using the masculine, which is the structure of organization, to actually make sure you have the feminine in your life. That's actually what will give you a strong enough balance. So if you're, for example, a single woman or a single man, so many men, again, in North America, I think this conversation is applicable equally to men and women in North America, because I find that a lot of men in North America have suppressed their feminine sides because of the conditioning they've had growing up, where their parents have said, or their fathers especially, because, their fathers came from a post-war period, etc., said that, emotions should be shamed, should be judged. There's no space for emotions, like emotions are weak. And so boys who grow into men at that point now don't feel safe enough to have their emotions. They think that their feminine side is something they need to shame, to suppress, to get rid of, which is why when men like that, so here's what's important, when a wounded man, that's what we call a wounded masculine, comes across a strong feminine, he will judge it, shame it, criticize it, and suppress it. Why? Because he's not ready for it. He doesn't really know how to handle it. He doesn't really know what to do with it, which is why a lot of men, when they come across women who actually demand of them to step up, to be better, to show emotions, they get triggered and push them away. They lock themselves inside, because that's not a emotionless man. That's a wounded man. And there's a strong difference between the two of those. It's a wounded masculine that creates the lack of safety to have emotions for themselves, which unconsciously then suppresses the emotions within the woman, and the child. So coming back to like why men need this as well is because men need to value, especially in North America, things like rest, things like beauty, things like slowing down, things like play, things like creativity, things like singing, dancing, flow. You know, I mean no judgment to like any of the white or North American guys, but I have heard so much from like, I love dancing. I come from a community of dancing. But when I go out dancing, I hear from so many people and so many women that like, oh my God, white guys can't dance for shit. Now this is stereotyped, I know, so I don't mean to judge any of you, you know, amazingly good looking or good dancing white guys out there. But what I want to say is that's never been a part of your upbringing. Because dancing looks weak. What looks stronger? Cracking a fucking six pack, sitting in front of the game and throwing a can of beer at your TV. That probably looks stronger than like going out and dancing with your friends. So if you start to value your own femininity, you're not going to be afraid of it. You're not going to be afraid to like to allow yourself to like to move, to dance, to just like, you know, swing on trees, to play with puppies. And that's actually where your energy is flowing and growing. We don't value feminine energy enough in our world in general, and especially in the Western world, we don't. And that's why the patriarchy survived. That's why organizations are full of like hyperstructure, where you have men who've, right through religious organizations, political organizations, have suppressed and shamed and judged women. Now, I'm not on a feminist rant here, because I think, you know, feminism has gone on a radical side where now it's gone to a side where they've started to hate men. In some ways, that's radical feminism. But I'm in the concept of the masculine and the feminine existing equally. And I think it is impossible for us as human beings to live a truly beautiful life if we don't value the other part that plays in our existence. So if you are someone who is not used to, let's say, having an emotional response or dancing or being creative or flow, you must use the masculine in terms of creating structure, in terms of discipline and commitment. So these two words, discipline and commitment, are very masculine words. If you're an artist, if you're a woman who wants to step into a place where you want to like play more, be creative, you want to sing, you want to dance more, what I've had to do for myself, because I want to bring out more of my feminine energy so I can actually connect with the universe, and I can, here's another massive tool, abundance is heavily linked with the feminine, because opportunity is created by the masculine. Preparation is the masculine, where you're actually doing the work to say, okay, I'm preparing myself, I'm making myself ready, all of that. But receiving is all feminine. So you can work as hard as you want. This whole concept of like the hard worker wins all is like the biggest piece of shit I've ever heard, ever. Like literally, I promise you. So you can work as hard as you want. But if your feminine energy is closed off, if your door is closed, if your hands are closed like this, you're not going to receive anything. And that's all the magic of feminine energy. So abundance, basically, the last linking point in abundance is feminine energy. Opening your hands like a lotus, being open, allowing it to come to you, trust, receiving, all of those are feminine. So if you want to make more of those happen, you want to allow yourself to have and receive more from the universe, you have to prioritize trust, you have to prioritize flow, you have to prioritize creativity, you have to prioritize dance, you have to prioritize expression, you have to prioritize connection, you have to prioritize vulnerability. Write down on a sheet of paper. This is a cool little like tip for you guys. Write down on a sheet of paper all of the characteristics which you define as being feminine. If you don't know all the characteristics which are feminine enough, that's okay. Research them. There's so much shit that's available on the internet today for free. Like here I am sitting and fucking like rambling, and you have all this stuff available. Think of how many others are also doing the same thing. So there's so much information available, especially of the masculine and the feminine. So think of what are some of the feminine characteristics or traits that I want to embody. What are some of the feminine things I want to have in my life? Write down that list. On the next side of your list, write down, how can I step into commitment or discipline to be able to have these things? So even when you talk about flow, right? Even when I talk about like flow or creativity, those things are very feminine, and you should not structure flow itself. But what you can structure, or you should not structure creativity, but what you can structure is time for creativity. For me, for example, my job has pushed me to be extremely creative. I have to come up with like posts to give you guys. I have to come up with videos for you guys to see. I have to come up with like topics that I can share and talk about. All of that gets me to be really creative. But I've noticed for myself that I have to actually, if I'm not creative and I don't prioritize this, like things like, for example, the followers goes down, people don't start really connecting with the work, the algorithm fucks me over. Thank you, Facebook and Instagram. So I have to prioritize creativity. I have to structure creativity. So all my meetings actually start only 2 hours after I start working in the morning, because the first 2 hours when my brain is open are meant for creativity. Those are meant for when I can come up with good ideas, when I can create posts, when I can like think about videos, and of course like IG lives like this later on in the evening when like I'm done with all the structure. But you have to be able to prioritize it. I've noticed for myself that if I don't rest, the quality of my work when I'm working hard is shit. So instead, what I've had to do now, believe it or not, and this is so funny, I'm in Mexico where it's so fucking hot. I've had to structure nap times in the afternoon, believe it or not. And I'm not complaining. I love to nap. I've always loved to nap in the afternoon. It's the best. You should you should try it. But when I nap, simply for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, a half an hour, 1 hour, my nervous system resets. So all the stress from the first half of the day also dissipates. And it's almost like the rest is a gift for me to be sharper for the rest of the afternoon or whatever else I have to do. So that's another way I've prioritized the feminine, which is rest. Now, being another aspect of being flowy or like lighthearted and fun for me comes through musical expression. So like the guitar, maybe like singing. I love to sing. I love to play the guitar. So I've had to prioritize it. Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.